Abzu is, at face value, exactly what you would expect to be coming from both the art director and composer for Journey. It's stunning both visually and audibly, a linear yet open adventure game where you can't die, and the kind of game where the voyage matters so much more than the destination. Before we start, I'd like to give a proper warning and say that we'll be delving into spoilery territory for both Journey and Abzu. Watch if you dare. Alrighty, let's go. In Journey, this destination is always known. You know that you're progressing to the peak of this mountain, your apotheosis, and you know this from your very first minutes of playing the game. It's one of the first things you see in the distance, and it propels your journey with a goal, assuming that you'll reach it while also encouraging you to take your time and soak in as much of the world as you can on your way there. You find ruins of an ancient civilization and how it both rose and fell. In Journey, your character represents a gradual loss of innocence over time, with a greater task set upon them by those that came before, and to do what all must do, reach the destination, and by doing so, grow up. You follow the hero's journey in Journey, with each chapter showcasing a different aspect of that classical character arc. The themes surrounding the civilization in Journey are all about evolving cultures and practices, and its downfall is more so due to the eventual aspects that can come with any evolving yet imperfect civilization: war, misuse of power, and possibly the most frightening of all, time. It almost seems like your character in Journey is being used by the other remnants of the civilization as a means of accepting what is lost, and finding a way for it to be remembered. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because, as you probably know if you're watching it, ABZÜ just recently released and a lot of people are comparing it to its older brother. And, I mean, understandably so, they do feel pretty similar. Reviews popping up have been criticizing ABZÜ for even taking a little too much from Journey, with Polygon praising the game and yet also calling it slightly shallow. Metro claimed it was a disappointingly direct copy of Journey, and while it offers incredible audio visuals, it lacks the depth and deeper meaning of Journey. When I played the game the first time, I was almost inclined to agree, until I decided I would think about it some more. And I'm glad I did. I played through the game a few more times to see if I had missed some things, and lo and behold, there was quite a lot to this world that you just don't notice your first time through. Maybe it's because Journey was so easy to swallow and derive meaning from instantly that we've expected the same thing out of Abzu. An instantaneous epiphany of understanding about the meaning of growing up, building literal unspoken bonds with each other, and a subliminal understanding of why we are where we are. Abzu doesn't give us this direct meaning in its storytelling, but I think it's ironic that we can criticize it for being a direct copy of Journey, and yet also have this expectation that we will derive the game's deeper meanings the same exact way. Abzu requires you to think in a way that Journey does not. The messages might be more of a challenge to find due to the fact that there are no intermission-style cutscenes between chapters anymore, but why should that mean that these messages aren't worth finding? Why should that mean that these messages aren't any more valuable? And when you take the time to realize what Abzu is truly about beyond just having fun with the fishies, you might find yourself a little bit glad that you weren't just spoon-fed the story. Abzu is not about acceptance and growing up like Journey was. Abzu is about atonement and recovery, and most of all, humility. Even in its gameplay, you might find yourself a little more unsure of what's coming next for you in your adventure. Not only do you not have a big mountainy destination to use as a landmark, but the story actually paints you, our character, as the last surviving consequence of a civilization of greed. As you explore the ocean, you don't have another player to roam with you as you did in Journey. You are alone. For some people, this has actually been another complaint about the design of the game, but I would argue that this was done rather intentionally. No matter how much this game looks and feels and is structured to be like Journey, it isn't Journey, and it isn't designed to necessarily make you feel proud of your history. Abzu is different, and in a way, Abzu is harder on us mentally because it exemplifies solid and real flaws in our society that we still have today. So anyway, you wander aimlessly and in solitude with nothing but the fish to keep you company. And you are alone because this time your civilization messed up. Unlike in Journey's civilization, where its downfall seemed to be a result of war amongst themselves, Abzu's civilization has left lasting detrimental effects on the world around it, and by my estimation, probably went extinct due to a lack of perpetual natural resources. To understand this better, let's take a look at the glyphs you find as you explore to get a better idea of their history. The civilization your character comes from once took water from the primal sea, Abzu, where in this game's universe is seen as both that wacky space water place your character visits in between chapters, as well as a sort of spiritual energy within each and every living thing. Think of it as the essence of life, the ether that sustains each of us in soul and consciousness. It's depicted as this bluer water that stands pretty well apart from the rest of the water in the game. In ancient Mesopotamian religion, Abzu is where all sources of fresh water, such as lakes and ponds and streams, derived their water from. And in the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Abzu was depicted as a living deity of fresh water who married the deity of salt water, Tiamat. When in the height, heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primeval Abzu, who begat them, and Chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together. This passage from the Enuma Elish aligns pretty cohesively with composer Austin Wintory's penultimate track on the score of the same name, Their Waters Were Mingled Together. In some ways, your character's peoples can be seen as an interpretation of Tiamat, both carrying the physical essence of Abzu among them, as well as portraying the two most common factors that Tiamat brought to Abzu the deity, a mingling of salt and fresh water, creating and appreciating life, as well as being the seed and embodiment of primordial chaos, that greed that led to the downfall of the civilization. Another song in the score, Chaos the Mother, proves this connection pretty well. As we touched on earlier, our character comes from the civilization that destroyed itself using the Abzu as a resource and over-harvesting it to the point of the destruction of wildlife. The glyphs portray this civilization as initially peaceful, actually giving back to the ocean the Abzu with which it found in these red jars that you can see around the ruins as you explore. Eventually, they find a way to place the Abzu within other things, like robots, the same ones that follow you around, as well as these large triangular containers and doors. Most importantly, they found a way to put the essence of Abzu into you, the protagonist. In what is probably the biggest reveal in the game, you discover that like the red jars and the robots and the pyramids, you too can carry this Abzu within you, life, and all that comes with it. If you were wondering why the robots seem so cute and lifelike, it's because they have this Abzu within them, a real soul. Our character is a robot as well, actually, a lifeless being created by the civilization as an ideal of the perfect version of their race, and given life by the Abzu. These people went from a mutually beneficial relationship with the ocean to becoming a parasite, harvesting all the Abzu for themselves and destroying the world around them. And that led its way to selfish avarice, entitlement, and a disregard for the other sea creatures who needed it. This greed led not only to their downfall, but the tainting of the innocent as well. Don't be too surprised if it all seems kind of familiar. This game is clearly painting parallels with the misuse of the environment that humans have caused today. Early on in the game, we see that a massive great white shark chomps down on one of our robot friends, not out of hunger, but out of hatred. The shark's loathing is the wound that we have caused to nature, and the caution and the fear and the hate that we have seated within Abzu, and he is ever present, stalking us from the background throughout the first half of our adventure. At first, we don't really understand why, but as we further explore the ruins of the past, we find out the truth. As a civilization, we have caused great harm. And just as Tiamat's children eventually murder Abzu in Babylonian mythology, our civilization's creations kill the shark and cause great injury to even us. Both the innocent and the guilty must pay the price, and you, being amongst the guilty, are most deservedly alone. But I would say that's only half of what Abzu is trying to tell us as a game. Almost immediately after we're left injured and alone again, we begin our healing process, something definitely represented in the music from this point forward. In the real world, human civilization has caused immense damage to wildlife. In fact, we're the most likely responsible cause for the most recent mass extinction on Earth, the Holocene extinction, which has been occurring since around 10,000 BCE. According to the species area curve, the current estimate is that around 140,000 species per year are facing extinction. That sucks. It makes Mughals going extinct in Final Fantasy Tactics not seem so unrealistic anymore, doesn't it? But Abzu goes out of its way to say that we as human beings are also compelled to empathy and connection, and through that we're able to begin seeking atonement and redemption for those that we've harmed. We don't need to be locked to a cycle of destruction. There are no destinies ordained. Through this, Abzu begins to become a message about hope for the future, that we can overcome our past wrongdoings and find beauty in mingling our waters once again, appreciating differences and similarities to both past species as well as ones in the present. This is even exemplified nicely by the order that the game likes to place the fish that you encounter. At the start of the journey, you see a lot of fish commonly known and seen today, but at this point in the adventure, closer to the end, you've gradually started to see some real prehistoric creatures that humans have only found fossils of. A true mingling of the waters indeed. By finding spiritual connection with the beings around us, we're able to gather just enough Abzu to revive our shark friend, and, most spectacularly, heal us in the process. That is really beautiful and says a lot about what we as human beings can accomplish. It's not so different from the civilization initially giving Abzu back to the ocean and watching life spring forth. What we may have destroyed in the past, perhaps if we care enough, we can save and find a sense of connection instead of greed. We don't have to feel lonely because we're not the only species on this planet. The Earth belongs to those in the sea, after all. Oceanic life outrageously outnumbers us and was around long before we human beings were. To the ocean, humans are just a fleeting existence. And yet before we move on, do we really have to destroy it? Especially when we can use our technology to help them instead? When art director Matt Nava was finishing up working on Journey, he originally thought of Abzu due to wanting to create an experience that celebrated the value of life, versus the melancholically empty yet beautiful world of Journey. We may not have a friend to guide us through Abzu, but I think that the ideas this game puts forth isn't really something a fellow diving buddy can just tell us. We need to be alone for this, because realizing the value of the world we live in is something we must each independently take seriously, or nothing will get done. Thanks for watching this video on Abzu. I hope it motivates you to think deeper about the games you play, and ways that you can apply what they teach to the real world. Hopefully this leads you to appreciate Abzu in ways that you might not have initially noticed. If you did enjoy this video, let me know, and I can consider making others similar to it for different games as well. You can find some Let's Plays on this channel, including one for Abzu relatively soon, so feel free to subscribe if that sort of stuff interests you. If you head on over to EXP, you can check out a weekly talk show on games and TV shows known as Pixel Talk, that I host with my good friend Luke. Special thanks to Giant Squid and 505 Games for making this game a reality, and Austin Wintory for providing that absolutely subliminal musical score that goes along with it. I'd like to invite you all to comment if you have any additional thoughts about the game's lore and meaning, especially if it's different from my own. This video expresses my thoughts and opinions on this game, and I've tried really hard to make them as accurate as possible, but that may not necessarily mean that they're completely similar to yours, or even right. I'd like to know what you think. You can buy Abzu on both PlayStation 4 and Steam on PC. I highly recommend it. Take care guys, thanks for watching.